Hello, everyone, and welcome to our show. Welcome, Danielle Koren. Hello, Danielle. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Gila.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Danielle, I actually reached out to you because I thought it was important that you share your message, you share your, Hasbara, what it's all about. And I think each person in our community should really know what you're doing, see how we can help, and how we can engage, our children, our students, our university student, and I hear high school student, into your organization. So I'm going to give you the floor and start telling me what is Hasbara all about.
Thank you, and thank you for having us here today. Hasbara Fellowships Canada, our mission is very simple. It is to train and empower student leaders on college and university campuses and also on high schools to be advocates for Israel and for the Jewish people, and to combat anti-Semitism on campus and at school, wherever they see it. And especially these past 2 years online, since COVID, so much of this has been happening online. The biggest thing that we can do, and the most important aspect of what we do, is giving students the confidence to speak up. Because it's very easy for students to know something wrong is happening and that some sort of hate is being promoted. But oftentimes students don't have the resources, the skills, or the understanding of how to respond, of how to refute some of this misinformation and propaganda they see. So we're all about giving students those tools, that confidence, so that they can speak up and so that they can serve as a voice for the Jewish people on campus.
Can I tell you, like, my views? I'm listening to you, and what I feel is a lot of people in our community maybe don't really know our history. I think we tend to forget our history. So, we know the big things, like we know the Holocaust, we know it as the name but how many of us really know our history? And sadly, I feel that if we don't know our history, it will repeat itself. And that's, if you go through our history, that is exactly what has been happening. So, and I'll tell you why I'm saying this, because I believe that I was, so knowledgeable in our history. And sadly, I found out that I wasn't that, knowledgeable for a simple thing. I was doing some studies about the Nuremberg Trials, which is, everybody know. We assume everybody knows the Nuremberg Trial. And when I really started going deep into it, I was astonished how much I did not know, and how much, as the Jewish people, we didn't get really what, we should have gotten. But anyway, so all I'm trying to say is all of a sudden, I was like, oh my God, I don't know our history. So how many are there like me that think they know, but really they don't?
That number is probably too great to be able to count.
We got to change
for this
it,
reason. For this reason, I would say our mission and the way that we fulfill our mission is very, very specific. We encourage our fellows, firstly, to speak a bit about the programs that we offer. We offer programs for college and university students, and we offer programs for high school students. The program we offer for college and university students is our flagship program, where we bring students on a 16-day intensive advocacy training program to Israel. And in our experience, Hasbara has been doing this for 20 years. And in Canada, we've been around since 2015 as an organization. In our experience, there's no better way to explain the issues that are happening in Israel and in the Palestinian territories. There is no better way, say, from bringing them to the land for them to see and for them to get an on-the-ground experience. Within 48 hours of when our fellows arrive in Israel, we have a program called Meet the Israelis, that we have them speak to Israelis of various political stripes, left-wing Israelis, right-wing Israelis you can say are settlers, Israelis who are pro-Palestinian, Israeli Arabs, Palestinians, and we have them see off the bat that this is not a zero-sum game, and this is not a black and white scenario the way that it's being depicted on campus and in North America. We want to show these students that there's many narratives, there's many voices here, and we don't need to think from the perspective of I'm pro-Israel, but I'm anti-Palestine. That's not at all what we do. For the majority of our students, everything they want to see is peace and coexistence between these peoples, and we're able to show them, the various ways in which Israel has attempted, to establish peace, and the various methodologies, in which this has happened, right? So it's very, very important for us that students see what's actually happening on the ground. Then, after their 16-day intensive advocacy program in Israel, these students come back to campus as Hasbara fellows, and they have typically, and we have research on this, over 90% of our fellows, when surveyed, feel like this program gives them the confidence to speak up, right? Because what are we talking about? There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of propaganda, I would say. Yes. This is coming from professors. This is coming from student groups. And for Jewish students, even for those Jewish students that went to Jewish schools and received an education, as you were saying, Gila, that you have this education and this history, they didn't have the practical tools to refute accusations that are drawn from the BDS crowd. They didn't have the tools to be able to speak about why anti-Zionism is a form of anti-Semitism, or why, for example, we abide the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. That's something that isn't taught in schools. A lot of this that's happening from a practical standpoint is not taught in schools. So that's why we're giving this to our fellows so that they have the confidence to do something about it. When our fellows return to campus, we tell them, you focus on the 70%, meaning you don't find the other Jews in the other, pro-Israel club and say, oh, hey, let's talk about how great Israel is. And you don't find the BDS and the anti-Israel groups and start wars with them, because really neither is going to change anything.
That's right.
People who have made up their minds have made up their minds. We refer to the 70%, right, as people who don't know, people who aren't Jewish or Muslim, people who don't know about Israel or Palestinians or anything like that. We want to engage those students so that we can have conversations with them and explain to them that Zionism certainly is not to be fulfilled at the expense of Palestinians or anyone else. Zionism is about Jewish self-determination in our ancestral lands. And in fact, different campaigns that our students do show very much that they want to see peace and prosperity for both peoples, for Israelis and for Palestinians. We even have this sticker campaign. See, one of my stickers there says peace and prosperity for Israelis and Palestinians. This is what our students have been plastering on their campuses. And when non-Jewish students see that and they see, oh, wow, so you're a Zionist and you want to see peace for these peoples, because the anti-Israel groups, all they want to see is Israel destroyed, right? And I think for people who still have a little bit of sechel and common sense, and that does still exist today, they're able to see that we are not the proponents of this conflict. We are not people who are trying to see this conflict continue and perpetuate. So, that's one of the very important methodologies, I would say, in how we do our work, that we're really focusing on the 70%.
So do you think, is this one of the things that, I don't know if it's the reason you're doing it, or is it happening while you're doing it, that when you're actually in university, you're basically changing people, like students' perspective of Jews? I'll tell you, I'll let you answer it. Sorry.
Well,
go ahead.
I would say it depends on the person, right? And their perception of Jews already. There are certainly so many falsehoods about the Jewish people, and there's a lot of reasons, I think, for that. I think even in our own community, to be completely tactless with you, we didn't do a good enough job in explaining what it is to be Jewish. As an Israeli Canadian, as a Bukhari Jew who grew up in a very overwhelmingly Ashkenazi community, I can tell you that there's no such thing as looking Jewish, right? There's no such thing,
I know.
And do you and I represent the stereotypes of what it is to be Jewish? Absolutely not, right?
No.
And this is something I think there's a severe lack of information and understanding about these issues, even within our own community.
Absolutely.
So that's something that has to be changed.
So I want to tell you an experience I had, that's the reason I was asking you a question. I was in the university, as I am, and everybody knows I'm, my last year. And I was sitting and it was like, I don't know, a meeting or conference, whatever. And somebody was sitting beside me, and I guess I had to introduce myself. And, I said, I'm from Israel, blah, blah, blah. And the girl was like, and she already knew me because we worked a little bit together. And she was like, wow. She says, you're so different. Like then she meant like so different, like like that's so-called, Israelis. And I was astonished. I said, no. I said, they're all like me. We're all like this, because they think that this is not who we are. Because you know why? A lot of the time they see on TV a different image of what Jews are like.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And they think, and I mean, I'll never forget that. She's like, you're so different. I'm like, no, we're all the same. They're all like me. But that's why I was asking, because they really have a different depiction of who we are.
Yes. Anti-Semitism, a lot of anti-Semitism stems from misinformation and from false narratives. One of the false narratives we've seen happening here, especially in the wake of this, very radical social justice movements, is this falsehood that Israelis and Jews are white supremacists, right? And there have been many
you haven't changed that narrative.
comparisons. Right. The reason I like to always mention, for example, that I am Bukhari is right away. I like to show that there are different types of Jews, and that this notion is completely false. And here in Canada and in America, because the overwhelming majority of Jewish people that people have come into contact with are either Ashkenazi or are white passing, they have made these assumptions, whereas the reality is the majority of Jewish people are from Middle Eastern countries.
That's right.
They're Mizrahi. Most people don't know what Mizrahi even is, right? And this is something where as well we need to be able to educate and inform, members of our community. And that's again something I think we go back to doing. We have a few different campaigns, for example, that we give to our students for them to use on campus. So there's a campaign called Faces of Israel, for example, that shows the various faces of Israel. That shows there are Arab Israelis, there are Muslims Israelis, there are Christians in Israel, there are Ethiopians, Eritreans, there are Kafkazim, Bukharim, Iraqi, Syrian, what have you, Ashkenazi, from all over, right? And the purpose of this campaign is to show you have been lied to when it comes to the Jewish people. You have been fed these stereotypes that are incorrect. And we want to be able to show that this is not the case. This is not what's happening. Again, it's a matter of, especially when we bring students, there's no quicker way to dispel the apartheid lie than bringing people to Israel and showing
when they can
them
see it. I know. How do you fight that? Like, this is amazing that when I hear it and I'm like, have you seen what's going on? Like, have you seen, Arab doctors, Muslim doctors? Have you seen lawyers, like the Muslim Arab lawyers? Like, what kind of apartheid? But they don't want to listen. They don't want to listen. How do you change? How do you change those views when it's actually like it's there? All you have to do is walk on the streets and you see that they're free and then like they are everywhere. They're part of us. They're living they're like over there, like we live in, I don't know, unity. I don't know. It's like so hard. How do you do that? How do you fight this every day?
The biggest lesson. This is what keeps me up at night every single night. The biggest details that we need to mention, the most important details we need to mention, is that we need to have nuanced conversations. There is nuance in everything. There is balance in everything, and we need to be able to have those conversations. Most importantly, as I said, wasting your time on haters or wasting your time on people who are actively anti-Israel isn't positive. What I've seen, and we work with some phenomenal groups that train our students and that work with our students, especially from a social media perspective, there are unique and specific ways you can do it. For example, following the conflict in May, which I think changed the world for many people in the Jewish community, for someone like me who's been working as a Jewish community professional for over a decade, it wasn't surprising for me because this is something I've seen forever. This is something I believe has always been there. And in May, it really just kind of rose to the surface.
Can you explain to the viewers that don't know what event you're talking about in May? Can you enlighten us?
Absolutely. So obviously the 11-day conflict between Hamas and Israel in May and especially there was a lot about Sheikh Jarrah, the neighborhood known as Shimon HaTzadik in Jerusalem. There were so many falsehoods and inaccuracies, and again, outright propaganda that was coming out about this. And again, this happens all the time whenever there's a conflict. The difference this time in May was how utilized it was and how much we saw it on social media. You couldn't avoid it on social media, right? In May, something happened that was triggering, where we saw anti-Israel sentiment and anti-Semitism on social media in unprecedented new ways. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. We are living now in this world where we are being told if we don't speak out, we are part of the problem, right? And we saw a lot of that happening during the Black Lives Matter protests. And I think with this protest, it was, and with this conflict, it was a very similar narrative in that sense, that we have to speak out against Palestine, speak out against Israel and apartheid Israel, brutally attacking Palestine. There was no mention, obviously, of over 5,000 rockets that were sent into Israel. And all of a sudden, the propaganda I'm accustomed to seeing on the daily was multiplied by 1,000, right? Yeah. Now, for our students, it was unavoidable because our students live on social media. They live on TikTok and Instagram. Yeah. They live online. There were friends of theirs that never comment on these issues, that were compelled and felt that they had to say something. And this is where our fellows and our high school interns with Hasbara were able to make change. And what's the first important step, especially when it comes to social media? It's having real conversations. It's not commenting on a post and saying, you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, and blah, 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 blah. That doesn't help. It contributes to a negative algorithm. It adds more negativity to that post. But when you're messaging people, real people, not, as I said, anti-Israel activists, and sharing with them, did you know that from the river to the sea actually is a slogan used by terrorist groups like Hamas and PFLP? No, I didn't know. Did you know that this is not a call for a two-state solution or for peace, but a call to destroy the state of Israel and to remove its Jewish citizens? No, we didn't know. And I can tell you of many cases where people removed their posts, young students removed their posts after our fellows and our interns had reached out to them and explained why this was anti-Semitic. And we first and foremost explained, you can support Palestinian rights, right? I'm actually say this all the time. There's nothing anti-Semitic about supporting Palestinians. Of course not. There's something anti-Semitic about supporting Palestinian terrorism. And there is a massive difference, right? Yeah. Because we as Jews understand, we're very intrinsically aware, I would say, since the Holocaust, of when people are trying to kill us, of when people are trying to exterminate us. And we are aware of the genocidal intentions of groups such as Hamas and PFLP. Yeah. So when we hear these slogans, we interpret them to mean kill the Jews, right? And if there are young people who don't interpret it that way, I understand that. Language is a part of interpretation. Everyone interprets language differently. We need to be able to show, and this is something that we're always trying to do, in explaining why these slogans are not peaceful slogans, right? And as I said earlier, everything I see in terms of Zionist groups, in terms of Jewish groups here in Canada, we want to see peace and prosperity. That's what we want to see. We want to see coexistence. We want to see Hamas putting down their weapons. We want to see, for all those rallies that we saw after the conflict in May, imagine if the rallies were calling on Hamas to drop their weapons and to come to the negotiating table with Israel. Treat your citizens fairly so that they can finally get some semblance of a real life. Imagine what would happen if that was the focus of the rallies, right? Hamas, put down your arms. You don't see it, and you don't see it on campus because they have been fed this propaganda that it is Israel to blame for the situation, when in reality, it is a very nuanced and complicated conflict in many ways. But really, when it comes down to it, is Israel has offered peace to Palestinian leaders on at least 8 occasions, as I'm sure you know.
You know what gets me is that university and high school, so forth, they're a place of education that you have to teach all sides. But
that's not happening.
I know. It drives me crazy. Why not? I mean, this is, show both sides. Let the student, decide, give them the opportunity, to think,
Sure.
Anyway.
That's what the media used to do. That's what the media used to do too. The media used to report the facts, and we as intelligent Canadians could read and come up for ourselves with what's going on. And now every single journalist you see is an activist, and they're already tried to make up their mind for you.
Do you know when I stopped watching I'm not going to mention who, a certain, media, is when I heard them report, Israel killed 3 Palestinian. But they forgot to mention there were 3 terrorists that just killed a whole bunch of Israelis. But they called them Israel killed 3 Palestinian, and that's what I said. That's the last time I watched this specific channel. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. Tell me what you want to say, or what you should be saying to our community. How can we, as parents, as grandparents, as uncle and aunts and so forth, and as Jews, even if we don't have kids, how can we move our children, mobilize our children to get to know our history, to be our leaders? Because, really, they're the next generation. We're depending on them.
Absolutely.
One day we won't be around, and they have to continue. So we want to make sure that their next, the world they're going to live in is going to be better than my father fought for me to have a better world.
Yeah, Bezat Hashem.
So this is your time. Speak to the community. Tell us what should we do? How can we help?
Thank you. Firstly, I will say this: despite the challenges that have come across and that have come to our community, especially since the conflict in May, this has actually galvanized students and young people, and even young professionals who I don't think were understanding of what was going on. This has galvanized a lot of these kids and a lot of these young people to react and to respond for the first time, maybe ever, right? As I said, I'm a professional Jewish community person, a professional Jew, I like to say. So I'm aware of this. But there's many friends of mine and colleagues of mine and people that I know who were not aware of the anti-Semitism happening. This was one positive out of the conflict in May, that students now and young people now are seeing it. It is unavoidable. They are seeing it. Why I'm mentioning this is that this has galvanized them to react. If you are on Instagram, if you follow individuals like Chen Mazig or Rudy Rockman or Yosef Haddad or some of our own fellows like Isabella Hazan or Noah Shafetinsky, aka Westside Gravy, these people have joined this new movement where now young people are feeling confident about their Zionism, confident about their Judaism, and they're expressing it because they're joining this community of like-minded individuals. And this is the one positive thing I can say.
I'm going to stop you for a second, just to correct you. I mean, Joseph Haddad is amazing. He's actually,
I love Yosef Haddad.
Yeah, I love him. I had him on the show before, and I know him. But he's an Israeli, but he's like he likes it. But he's like an Arab Israeli that is pro-Israel, and I think that's to his credit. I mean, he's amazing. So just want to mention, give him credit.
100%, Menchus. And there's others. That's Khaled Abu Tomeh. There's Bassem Aid. We do have allies, and there are individuals, Emirati individuals like Hassan Sashwani, for example, is phenomenal. And this is something, again, you're not seeing on campus, but you're seeing on social media. So in response to your question, how the community can help, I think firstly, we need to understand that on campus, especially universities, in my opinion, from what I've seen, we're not going to be able to eradicate this anti-Israel mentality from academia. It is too far ingrained. The professors since the 1960s that have been hiring other radical left-wing professors has now come to 2021, where any person who speaks about sociology or poli-sci or history typically is not someone who is even balanced on these issues, right? And in my opinion, when you have professors who are outwardly expressing falsehoods about the Jewish experience, about Judaism, about that Jews are an indigenous people to Israel, they are emboldening and legitimizing their students to attack the Jewish experience. Because when professors are doing it, students, of course, are going to repeat the actions of their professors. But what I do believe we can do, and what we have been doing, Gila, is we are able to effect change at a grassroots level.
Okay.
For example, I have students and fellows who speak up during these classes. I can say, for example, one recently where I have a law student, who was on a Zoom call, and the professor, was talking about the indigenous rights of the Métis people, right? There was a class about the Métis people in Canada. And the professor said the Métis are indigenous to Canada, just as the Palestinians are indigenous to Palestine, right?
Oh.
And one of our fellows, and again, it's very easy to just, as a Jewish student, cringe, but not do anything about it, right? And this is where we come in, that we want to make sure we're always speaking up. So our fellow in the classroom said, "Excuse me, professor, but by saying that and by not mentioning that the Jews are also indigenous, you are supporting one people at the expense of another. Could you not have mentioned that both peoples are indigenous to this land at the very least?" And other students said, "Yeah, that's a good point. Why was that not mentioned?" And the professor, I actually can't believe it, backed down and didn't continue, which a lot of times I can tell you stories where they do.
So I have to, sorry, I keep
No,
interrupting.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I can keep talking.
I have to, I agree with what you're saying, but I also have to mention that there are professors. I was in one class and they were talking about, as I mentioned before, about the Nuremberg trial and so forth, the Holocaust. And one student got up and asked, what are you going to say for those that say that the Holocaust never existed? Okay. So this professor was amazing. And then he's not a Jew, but he's a historian. He knows the history. So I'll never forget, I didn't even have to say anything because I was like, I'm ready to say something, but I didn't have to because he said this is the most documented, genocide, in history. And most of it has been recorded by the Nazis, by the German, not just the Allies. Anyway, I just want to mention that sometime, very rarely, there are good professors in university that actually stands up. I was a witness. That's the only reason I mention it. But again, I've also witnessed other time where it doesn't happen, where they don't even mention anti-Semitism in Canada, which is just mind-boggling. Anyway, continue. Sorry about that.
No, please don't. I listen. I agree with you, and I'm actually very happy you mentioned it, Gila, because it's, to me, balance and objectivity is everything, right? And while I say that, yes, the anti-Israel mentality certainly is ingrained in academia, that is not to say that there aren't balanced professors or professors who understand that anti-Semitism is on the rise. It's unfortunate that, especially Jewish professors that I've come in contact with, there are many, who have made the lives of their Jewish students very difficult, right? And I can speak to experiences where Jewish students were trying to get a definition of anti-Semitism adopted in order to better combat anti-Semitism. And because that definition might be seen as to be political or in any way supported by pro-Israel groups or Zionist groups, professors and Jewish professors have come out against that, against the efforts of their own Jewish students, right? And this is something that
That's the worst.
See.
That's the worst.
That is the worst. That is the worst, because this is what we're up against here. And when you have individuals like that, who are outwardly denying our experience as Jewish students, that affects them, right? So in answer to your earlier question, what can the community do to support our students? There's so many things that you can do, but number one, listen to the students. Listen to the students and let them speak. I think so often community representatives and organizations and individuals try to tell students what they need to do and how they need to do it, right? And they try to tell students, no, you need to do this, or oh no, you need to do that, or you have to stage a rally, or oh, we're going to help you do this. And none of that, I think, is very helpful, only because when there are students who are speaking out against Israel and who are showing that it is a student issue, right? The same issue applies, right, for our Jewish students. They need to be the ones that are speaking about it. They need to be the ones who are empowered, who are emboldened, who are confident, as I said, to speak about it. And we need to listen. We need to listen to these students because there's a lot that they have to say. A lot has changed, in the past few decades, right? So when you have activists and individuals who are of a certain age group who are suggesting, oh, students need to do X, Y, and Z, sometimes you might be right, but sometimes, more importantly, you need to listen to the students, because what they are saying really, I think, opens a window to what is happening and what is transpiring on campus. And we need to support them, right? We need to support them in every way possible. So really, I would suggest, first and foremost, for all community members who are watching this right now, to find out if you have kids in university. Gila, I know you mentioned you have a couple of kids in university. It's always important to listen from their perspectives, what's happening, right? Because I'll tell you, and this is my full-time job, and this is my life, as I've mentioned to you. It's not to say that every single Jewish student is experiencing anti-Semitism 24/7. Absolutely not, right?
No,
And there are members of the community, I think, who are saying, "Oh, anti-Semitism in York is so bad; it must be awful for the Jewish students," and that's not true. Jewish students can have a phenomenal experience at York. I'm sure you can speak to it yourself.
I can,
That's not to say, right? That's not to say that there aren't negative players or that there aren't certain efforts, that groups and even professors are doing against Jewish groups and Jewish students. But it's also not to say that, it's the worst time to be Jewish, because really it isn't. We do have a lot of allies still. We do have support, and most importantly, thanks to organizations like ours, there are resources that you have. So when you have Jewish kids who are telling you, "Oh, well, I don't know about this, and oh, I don't know about that, and I'm not really sure, and I'm Jew-ish," which I can't stand that term. Because to me, there's no such thing as Jewish. If you're Jewish, you're Jewish, right? I don't care how religious you are. I don't care how quote unquote secular you are. It doesn't make any difference, right? We're all equal. We're all Jewish. We are all from Am Yisrael. We all come from Israel. We're all indigenous to Israel, whether you like it or not. That's the history, right? And the archaeology and the genetics can speak to that. That's the next thing that I would say. Because when we're trying to engage non-Jewish students, and in Canada especially, so many students are agnostic and atheist, we don't ever tell them to talk about the Torah or to mention the Bible or anything like that, because we don't need to. History is on our side. There is an abundance of archaeological evidence that shows that Jews have never left this land, and this is
indigenous
where we were.
of the land. Precisely. I think we need. I think language. Sorry, I think language is important. I think this is something that we need to say it loud and clear, is that we are the indigenous of the land, but I don't hear it enough.
Yes, and I would say that does not negate the experience of Palestinians or Arabs. To say that we are indigenous to this land is simply to repeat a truth, to repeat something that is on the historical record. So when you are seeing professors and student groups, right, that purport to be in support of Palestine and Palestinians, they're not, in my opinion, because all of their efforts are focused on demonizing and delegitimizing Jews, right? And they go so far as to deny and manipulate Jewish history, right? And when you have Jewish students who are telling you outright, this is where we come from. As Jewish people, Israel has always been part of our hearts, our lives, our language, our culture, our religion. It has to do with everything. We are a land-based people here. This isn't just a religion. This is a peoplehood. This is a nation. I think this is something as well we didn't do a good enough job explaining to our own community, and something we need to correct right now. And the more non-Jews who are able to understand this, I think the more impactful our efforts are. We bring non-Jewish students, for example, on our advocacy training programs to Israel, and we try to engage non-Jewish students. There's usually a couple that who join, and we want to engage these non-Jewish students, because when you have them explaining, I'm not pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, I'm pro-people, I'm pro-humanity. I want to see these peoples live and coexist with each other. When they understand the history and the reality of what's going on, they see this is not to blame on Zionism. This is not to blame on Israel. This is not to blame on the IDF, right? And it's not to say it's only to blame on Palestinians either, but it's definitely something that requires a nuanced conversation, and that isn't what is taking place.
I was going to say that this is what we need as a people in Canada. Let's say we're talking about Canada right now, it should happen everywhere, but we should, have conversation. Like I was telling you before, like dinner conversation with our kids to bring this issue, and by talking about it, we're educating ourselves and our kids, and give them. I think it's empowering them to reach out to institution or organization like yours, to do something, to move. And even those that have moved on, finished university, are young, because they're the generation that are going to hold the torch. and their children.
100%.
So they need to be empowered. They need to reach out to you, and they need to be a part of something, a part of, I would say a part of Hasbara. But I mean, our time is running out, Danielle. Can you tell me just a little bit about the high school? Because you mentioned high school now.
Yes, and we haven't really even spoken to it. So we realized a few
You'll have
years
to come
ago.
back, Danielle. We just know, and that's about it.
Is that the sham? I would be honored.
Yeah.
We realized a few years ago that there were students coming from high schools, especially from the Jewish bubble, from Jewish schools, who were not prepared for the hostile climate that awaits them at campuses such as U of T or Concordia. When we saw this happening, we realized that we could create a program that speaks specifically to high school students so that we are able to prepare them with the tangible skills necessary to be able to discuss these issues and to combat anti-Semitism and anti-Israel propaganda once they do arrive on campus. So you mentioned, for example, how you love to hear about Jews being indigenous. Me too, right? This is something that is a focal point of what we do. We have worked with indigenous advocates. We have had indigenous speakers speak to our students. And we actually have, as part of our high school program, sessions that explain why Jews are an indigenous people, right? And it explains what indigeneity is. And even if you look at the criteria set by the United Nations in 1970s, Jewish people meet each and every single one of these criteria, what it means to be an indigenous people. And it's important to understand that. We also offer programs to our high school students that explain why is anti-Zionism today's version of anti-Semitism? Why is BDS so prevalent on university campuses? How do we speak against BDS? How do we communicate for Israel and advocate for Israel in a way that doesn't look like we're brainwashed, Jewish students? Because that's unfortunately some of the stuff that we're up against. And this is what I mean, again, going back to speaking to the 70% and speaking from a balanced and nuanced perspective, where we're able to really speak to the issues. When we have our fellows and when we have our high school students, for example, meet, on Zoom, individuals like we mentioned, like Bassem Aid and Khaled Abu Tome and Yosef Haddad, who has spoken to our students. By the way, Yosef Haddad has spoken on 2 occasions to our students. They're able to engage others about the reality and about the truth, right? They're able to explain, this is what's happening. I was there. I spoke to these Palestinians. I spoke to these Israelis, right? And we have, with our high school program, we introduce them to these various figures. It's all done through Zoom. We don't bring the high school students on our Israel trip. That's only for the university students. But they're able to see and to meet these people and explain, right, the reality. For example, BDS is detrimental to Palestinians, and it's very easy to explain that. When people learn, thousands of Palestinians are trying to cross the border into Israel every day, you can ask them why. Why are they trying to cross the border? Why are they trying to get into Israel? They're getting into Israel to work. Where are they working? At Israeli companies, at Israeli factories, where they're making 4 times as much as what they're making in the West Bank, or maybe 9 times as much as what they're making in Gaza. And when you, BDS, are successful, they are the ones being affected. And we had, when we bring our fellows, for example, to Israel, we have them meet these Palestinian workers. We went just in the summer, for example, to Barkan Industrial Park, to the factory there, where there are dozens of Palestinian workers, and our students can hear from their mouths why BDS is detrimental to their experience. It's not to say that these Palestinians are hardcore Zionists, we love Israel, we want to. No, absolutely not. And this is what people have to understand. This is not a black and white issue. The anti-Israel groups have done a phenomenal job on both high school level and the university level, painting this situation as if it's the black and white, story of white supremacy versus, versus black that we see in Canada and America. They're trying to make it about skin color. They're trying to make it about race, and that's not the reality in Israel. When you go to Israel,
race? There's so many colored Jews in Israel. We started to talk about it in the beginning, that there are different kind of Jews, but nobody knows about it. That we're considered, let's say, also colored people. That's what they call people from the Middle East are like colored people. They're not. Okay, I'm not going to go into this race. I'll get myself in trouble.
listen, like Khan Mazig, for example, he uses the term Jews of color, right? He uses the term
Okay.
Jews of color, and he explains that anyone who is Mizrahi,
Yeah.
Middle Eastern, or from North Africa
Yeah.
is kind of a
Yes.
Jew of color. There are people who use these terms. For me, because I've always identified as a Bukhari Jew, that I'm born in Israel, I've been raised in Canada. For me, I own that term as being Bukhari, but to me, that only speaks to my diaspora experience. In my
Yeah.
experience in the diaspora, right?
Right.
The reason we're speaking English now is because of where we are in the diaspora, not that this is where we come from. And
Yeah.
that, I think, is what needs to be explained. You are not German Jews. You're not from Ukraine. You're not from Russia. You're not from any of these places. Jews are from Israel. This is where we're from. I don't care how many thousands of years have passed since we came from there. This is where we're
Yeah.
from as a people,
Yeah.
right? This is what I think, in some ways, our community has done a poor job in explaining this, that we are from Israel. This is where we're from, right? I think we tried to make it easier, in the West by saying, oh yeah, I'm a German Jew, or I'm a Russian Jew, or my parents are from Poland. No, your parents are not from Poland, because they were never considered Polish. They were never considered white. And even for those Jews who are white passing, you are not white. You have not had the white experience. You are not celebrating Christmas and Thanksgiving. You are celebrating your Jewish holidays. And those holidays are those are land-based holidays that come from Israel, right? So it's something where there's so much more information and education, I think, that is necessary within our own community. It is something I see that is happening amongst our youth. They are owning their Zionism, which is good. They can explain even to older members of our community, and I think that's something that needs to be more widespread, right? I know you said you were finishing with time. I just want to say,
Yeah. Go ahead.
it's so important right now for every single Jewish organization to be on the same side. Even if we look at things a little bit differently here and there, or that our niche is this or your niche is that, the anti-Israel movement is on the same exact side. There is no variations. They are on one side. They have galvanized for their support against Israel. We need to be the same, right? We need to drop the semantics. I don't care if you're left wing. I don't care if you're right wing. If you understand that Israel has a right to exist as a sovereign Jewish state, that's all I need to know, right? And all the other politics don't matter. And now I think is the time where these organizations, we need to work together. We need to unite. On campus, we have shown, because there are a few campus organizations like Hillel and ours, that we have put out joint statements, that we have done joint events and webinars at the beginning of this semester to show to our students, even if sometimes we might not have the same response to something, we are on the exact same side. And you, Jewish student, you have our support. Anything you need, you come to us, whether it's Hasbara, whether it's Hillel, whether it's any other organization, and we are going to support you. And I think that's so important now, because we can't argue anymore. There's two Jews, three opinions thing. We need to throw it to the garbage.
I agree with you 100%. And I mean, it's a very, as you were talking, I remember, Golda Meir said it, she's like the prime minister of like 2 million prime ministers, but that's okay. We all have different opinion, but at the end of the day, we all agree on one thing, that we have to stick together. And I think that's basically the message we're trying to get, that we all, yeah. Our Golda Meir. So anyway,
I agree
Daniel,
with you, Gila.
I listen, I support you. I think a lot of, a viewer maybe have a better understanding of what Hasbara does. I think every Jewish parents should get their kids together and talk about it. Let them get, involved in Hasbara. And I think our children should know our history and know how how to, I guess, empower themselves with knowledge of who we are.
100%.
And you're doing a great job. You'll come back to us. I mean, we have a lot more to talk about. We'll do it again. And until then, I wish you a lot of luck, and I'll help you in anywhere I can. And continue doing the good job on campuses and in high schools. We need you. We need, Hasbara.
Thank you, Gila. I think now more than ever, what you're saying is 100% accurate. I think that every single Jewish person has the unique responsibility to stand up and to speak up. If you have a platform, if you're on Instagram, if you're on Twitter, wherever you are, speak up. This is political anti-Semitism. We are being attacked because we have a sovereign nation. And when people tell you, oh, no, I'm not against Jews, I'm just against Zionists, they're saying they want Jews to be the wanderers of the world. It is the same thing. You are attacking the only Jewish homeland that exists, this is a form of anti-Semitism. And there's people who might not even understand that, right? And that's where, again, there's people who are unaware that they're even being anti-Semitic, that they're doing it not even intentionally, and we have to be able to engage them. So 100%, we are there for students.
Awesome.
We do programs for parents too, because some parents don't know about these issues. And if anyone watching has additional questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm very easy to find. Yeah.
So we'll do a next show for the parents. So
okay, great.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. And I'm going to tell my viewer, look up Hasbara, and let's make it a better world for everyone. And
Amen,
I'll see
amen.
you. Yeah, and I'll see you, Daniel, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thank you so
Shalom,
much.
good afternoon. My name is Daniel Koren. I'm the director of Hasbara Fellowships Canada. And I'm here with one message for all of you. Own your Jewish pride. Own your Zionist pride. And do not let the haters get you down. I am humbled to see many of you today waving Israeli flags and showing your Magen Davids. Make no mistake, this flag is not just the flag of the state of Israel. It is the flag of Jewish people worldwide. Right now in Brussels, in Berlin, in New York, in Toronto, there are people afraid to publicly identify as Jews. People afraid to wear the Magen Davids. This week I was at a park church in Dundas wearing my Magen David, and a woman came up to me and said, I want to commend you, I want to thank you for wearing your Magen David in public. I am Jewish and I am not brave enough. This is not Berlin circa 1933. This is Toronto circa 2021. We cannot allow this to happen anymore. We cannot allow our voices to vanish, and we cannot allow others to write our experience for us. All of you wearing your Magen Davids now, never take them off. As anti-Semitism has continued to skyrocket, many are asking why. Why is this happening right now? In my view, one of the biggest problems we face as a community, we're too worried about who's Ashkenazi or who's Sephardic, who's Reform or who's Orthodox, who's conservative or who's liberal. And to that, I think it's all shtuyot. We all need to unite. We all need to unite as one. We are all Jews, and we are all from Judea. We must also work with our allies, and we've seen so many allies here with us today, against their own oppression. Can anyone read the shirt that I'm wearing? No? Jews are from Judea. I wear this t-shirt to educate others that Judea is not another word for Israel. That is it. Okay? We are not from Poland or Ukraine. We are not from Tashkent or Casablanca. We are not only a religion. We are a nation. We are a people. It is time that we understand this. It is time that we come together. Forget about the semantics and present a united front. Right now we are witnessing a movement that aims to destroy the world's only Jewish state. And make no mistake, the proponents of this movement have no problem with any other state. That is anti-Semitism. That is Jew hatred. As Jews and as Canadians, we have a unique responsibility to educate those around us about Judaism and about Zionism. And we also need to educate ourselves, because there's so much misinformation in our own community. Number one, anyone here, go home after this, read a landmark survey from 2018 of Canadian Jews. It shows that Canadian Jews, without a doubt, Zionism is our normative form of identification. For Canadian Jews, only 8% of Canadian Jews do not support Israel. 8%. For any anti-Israel groups that have Jewish in their name, and I won't name them, I won't give them the satisfaction, they are fringe, they are a fringe radical minority. Just because they are the loudest on Twitter does not mean they represent us or our community. Number two, do not let others to define Zionism, Judaism, or anti-Semitism. We get to define these terms. If you see it, call it out. Okay? If you are a true progressive, you support Zionism, which does not negate the experience of Palestinians or Arabs. I have met thousands of Zionists in my time as a Jewish community professional, and all of them support peace and prosperity for two peoples. If you are anti-Zionist, you are anti-peace. I see a great sign here, so I believe somebody that had it. It is only anti-Zionists who want to see death and destruction. Do not forget that. Number 3, you can indeed support Palestinian rights without supporting terrorism. You can support Palestinians without supporting Hamas, without supporting the PFLP. You can support Palestinians and Israelis alike because neither of us are going anywhere. Number 4, as I said, Jews are not only a religion, we are a nation. As a Bukhari Jew, I like to remind others that Jews comes in all shapes and sizes and colors. The reason we speak different languages today, the reason Jews are scattered, is because we were exiled from our homeland. But we never lost sight of who we are. For thousands of years, for those of us in the diaspora, we yearn to return home. For thousands of years, we kept Israel in our hearts. That is Zionism, and it predates political Zionism by millennia. Take this knowledge and educate those around you. There are 22 Arab countries in the world. To quote the great Hillel Neuer, tell me, where are your Jews? Yemen, Iraq, Egypt, Syria, you all had huge Jewish communities. Where are your Jews? They are gone. Because the only apartheid that exists today is in the Arab world. It does not exist in Israel. Number 5, and this is my last point, this conflict is not about the settlements, it is not about Sheikh Jarrah, it is not about the Gaza Strip. It is about the Arab and Palestinian refusal to exist, to accept our right to exist, to accept a Jewish state, to accept that we have a right to our homeland. That and that alone is the greatest impediment to peace. Some of you might know I run an organization called Hasbara Fellowships Canada. We train students to advocate for Israel and combat anti-Semitism. And to all the students who are here, I repeat, do not allow the haters to rewrite your experience. Do not be silent in the face of anti-Zionism on your campus. When student groups speak about the indigenous Palestinians without mentioning the indigenous Jews, raise your hand, refute their arguments. Tell them that you do not need to support one people at the expense of another people. Tell them you will not allow them to rewrite our history. Tell them that Zionism is beautiful because Zionism is peace. Zionism is coexistence. Zionism is progress. Students, when you go back to your campus, be proud of who you are, be proud to be a Zionist, and be proud that you support peace and prosperity for Israelis and Palestinians alike. I'll leave you with this short poem. I hope you like it. Until the day that I die, Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you very much. This movement that calls for the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That is not a call for peace. That is a call for Israel's destruction. The Zionists I know here, the Jews I know here, we are pro-peace, we are pro-Israel, we are pro-Palestine. We are pro-existence of peoples. I know do not call for ethnic cleansing. Only Hamas calls for ethnic cleansing. And only when Hamas is gone will we find peace between our peoples. I will be clear. Support for Palestinian human rights is indeed of the utmost importance, and we've all mentioned that today. Palestinians now are pawns of their corrupt political leaders, a fact that you'll never read, by the way, in mainstream media. And that's why it's more important to say now, Israelis and Palestinians deserve to live in peace and prosperity. But support for Palestinians does not come at the expense of Israelis or at the expense of Jews in the diaspora. Support for Palestinians does not allow you to attack Jews in Toronto and Montreal and London to go on anti-Semitic tirades. To all the student groups who are speaking about the indigenous Palestinian population, I implore you, look into this word, indigenous. Look what it means. Look at the United Nations criteria on what it means to be indigenous. You will see that Jews meet each and every single criteria for being an indigenous. Linguistic, historical, religious, and spiritual relationship to this land is well documented. There is a reason why we pray to Yerushalayim. There is a reason why it's a mitzvah simply to be in the land of Israel. There is a reason why this is the diaspora, because Israel is our homeland. Yes! We are not Polish, we are not Russian, we are not German, we are not Bukhari, we are not Ashkenazi, we are not Sephardic. We are Jews. All of us are Jews, and you come from Judea. Right now, I need all of you to be active. Jews, as Jews, we have the unique civic responsibility to stand up. No one's going to stand up for us. We have to stand up.
Damn right!
Social media, engage in conversations. Don't waste time on the haters. Create WhatsApp chats with like-minded people. Make calls to action when you see anti-Semitism happening on social media. We cannot afford to be silent.
Woo!
I have been working in the Jewish community for over 10 years, and I will be clear, anti-Semitism from the left or the right is disgusting. But when you see it from the right, Heil Hitlers and swastikas, it is condemned instantaneously. And when you see it from the left, it is legitimate. It comes from legitimate people, it comes from the NDP, from MPs like Nikki Ashton, and that is what we are up against. Fixate on Israel when you ignore real human rights abuses in Iraq, in Syria, in Iran, from Palestinian leaders, then you are calling for the destruction of Israel. You are anti-Semitic. When you say, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist, guess what, buddy? You are anti-Semitic. And you're not a progressive human rights activist either. We as Jews get to define what anti-Semitism is, what our experience is. Not Muslims, not Christians, not anybody else. We as Jews get to define what anti-Semitism is. Golda Meir said it best. Peace will come when the Arabs like Hamas love their children. Love their children more than they hate us. When we don't use them as human shields. I will leave you with this. I have seen so many of these rallies, and so many of these people are fueled by hatred, only by hatred. Okay, but the thing that gives me joy and satisfaction, we're not going anywhere. They can live 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. Israel is still here. Israel will still be strong. The Jewish people are still here. Am Yisrael Echad.